Okay.
Hi.
Yes, it gives me immense pleasure in introducing you to this session that we are having today. That is, it is a part of the Save Wetlands campaign, and our ministry has been involved in a lot of wetland conservation issues. That, trying to get solutions to this campaign that is going on, to rather, conserving wetlands and addressing issues. And having these awareness talks is one of them, where we have known people who talk about the issues concerning wetlands, so that they come to light to different people, and we come towards to getting a solution, if we can work out to a amicable, workable solution, so that everyone is happy, and most importantly, our wetlands are conserved for the future generation, along with the rich biodiversity that we have. So for today, we have a speaker whom I've known for over 25 years now, and he is associate professor and head of zoology department in the Carmel College for Women, Goa. He also founded the Biodiversity Research Cell at Carmel College in the year 2000, and has over 35 years of teaching experience. He's also Goa's first Best Teacher Awardee in higher education in 2015, with having over 50, almost 50 research papers in peer-reviewed and indexed journal. And he's a very popular columnist in the newspapers in Goa, writing about several environment causes, about this environment and wildlife popularization. And his articles were highly appreciated even during the COVID time, when he shared a lot of information among the public through the mode of newspaper writing. And it's really good to see that we have researchers, scientists, professors of Dr. Manoj Borkar's caliber sharing his opinions and views over here. He's also a member of the State Biodiversity Board, Wildlife Board expert committees for several committees in Goa as well as other parts of the country. And he has traveled across several countries for academic purposes, and his interest lies mostly in human-wildlife interaction, archaeology, arachnology, and ecoethology. He is also the member of Board of Studies for Goa University, as well as the NC University in Mumbai. And without taking much time, having known his work for so many years, that he has worked along the coastal areas, the inland wetlands, as well as a lot of marine ecosystems and caves, I would request Dr. Borkar to introduce us to the topic that he has chosen today, that is Chicalim Bay of Goa and eco-fragile estuarine wetlands. Over to you, Dr. Borkar. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. And if I may just share my screen, please.
Yes, sure, please.
Just a minute. I'm not very good with this. Just a minute.
No, not an issue. Otherwise, my
colleagues. No, I have somebody who will assist me.
Yeah.
From the beginning. Yeah, I guess this should be fine. Just give me a minute, please. Right, I just need a confirmation that you can see my first slide, please. Are you able to?
I'm not able to see the first slide.
Okay. Actually, I'm sharing my screen here.
Or no,
just a minute. Just a minute. Screen.
Yeah, here it comes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much at the outset. Very grateful to Dr. Golden, who's been, well, not just a friend, but somebody who I get a lot of inspiration from in terms of his perseverance, consistency, and should I say brilliant contribution to not just the science of wetland ecology, but I mean, he's one person who I've always seen seeks to practice what he preaches, and that's something very inspirational. So thank you in the first place for this. amazing opportunity for me to connect with like-minded people whose heart beats, for the wetlands. And I guess, and I hope I'm not right, that we are a minority, because there are more, organized entities that seek to, sort of destabilize everything for ulterior motives. But nonetheless, that should not be really a kind of discouragement. And whatever little we can do in our lifetime, I think, is what we should be doing. So just a small contribution from the beautiful state of Goa is what I seek to highlight this morning under the aegis of this series of talks towards creating awareness on wetlands. And maybe, as you suggest, at the end of 30 minutes, maybe we could have a small interaction. So today, what I seek to present before you is a slightly different picture than what people conventionally hold in their minds about my state. Goa is much publicized as a state of sunset and sea. And of course it is so. But we also have a green side to Goa, and we've got a very strong segment in our population which qualifies to be the green warriors. We're trying our level best to see how we can balance our economic aspirations or developmental desires with the need to conserve whatever little we still have in our state. And therefore, I thought this morning it would be most appropriate for me to take you to a very serene, tranquil village in Marmugao Taluka, which is some of you who probably landed at the Goa airport in Daboli. We have two airports now, one in the north. The Manohar International Airport is somewhere in Mopa. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about down south. We have a small serene village known as Chicalim or Chikle, as we call it in our local language, Konkani, which is blessed with amazing natural endowments that offer to the population here not just an aesthetic pleasure in the sense, something amazing in terms of the view and, the landscape and the waterscape, but much more than that in terms of what it holds, the natural endowments which allow sustainable livelihoods, something which has a lot of ecosystem services that it offers, and so on and so forth. So, when we speak about wetlands, very rarely, I must confess, when I thought I would speak on Chicalim Bay, I called up Golden, maybe I sent him a message and I asked him, I said, more or less, I know that a bay qualifies to be a wetland, but I just need a confirmation. And he said, of course, a bay is very definitely a wetland. So I did a little bit of my revision on what qualifies to be a wetland and what exactly is a bay and how is it different from a gulf. And thanks to you, Golden, I think you made me go through all my basics again, because as we advance, as they say, we learn more and more about less and less. So sometimes you need to move back and check on your basics. And that's basically what I did. So yes, Chicalim Bay indeed is a wetland. It has its own perils of being a wetland, which is an interface between human population, being an industrial zone, being a critical site, which is, as I perceive it, and as has been endorsed by several studies that have happened through institutes as prestigious as the CSIR, National Institute of Oceanography. And we now have no qualms in accepting that this is a very eco-fragile marine bay, or rather I would say it's an estuarine bay, because it's kind of under tidal influence, and all that goes with this kind of salinity ingress during high tides, because the Arabian Sea is barely some meters away, not even kilometers away, and then it gets drained, of course, by supplied by some riverine ecosystems. You've got the Zuari, which flows into this bay, and you've got the sea that rises during the high tide, creating a wonderful microcosm of an estuarine wetland. So I'm going to talk to you about what this bay is all about. It's a little bit about its history, a little bit, of course, about the politics. I'm sure you agree with me, there can't be anything without politics today. So yes, there has been some sort of a positive, constructive politics happening, and there's a lot which is not very positive. I'm going to touch upon the sociology, the demography, a little bit about the socioeconomics, and of course, in a big way, the ecology. So that's the opening statement, the Chicalim Bay of Goa, an eco-fragile estuarine wetland. As I just said, I am personally very intrigued by etymology, which is why a certain term is coined and what is the basis of coining the term. So I was very curious probably to know why is this village called Chicalim or Chicle. We're all very proud Chicle cars. So I believe if you look at the word Chicle or Chicalim, it's got something to do with Chicol, which is nothing but a very rich, fertile silt due to the process accretion. I need to emphasize on this point. Chicalim is a coastal agrarian village, which means the soil here is extremely fertile. It's probably got to do with the soil fertility. Conventionally, you call the Chicol. And we also have cousins, Kazans, as you call them in English, a sort of agro-pisci silvicultural complexes where you have a combination of agriculture, you have mangroves, you also have a lot of fishing activity. So this kind of complex, as I love to call them, and I borrow these words, of course, from one person we all have been inspired by, including Dr. Golden, I'm sure will concur with me. Dr. A.G. Untawale is no more with us. But I still remember his words that he would always love to say that mangroves are solar-powered, tide-subsidized, and pulse-stabilized ecosystems. And that's so very true about the bay and the little, patch of mangroves that it holds. And all of us know that mangroves, wherever they exist, they're very important, not just in terms of offering a kind of green buffer to hostile climate, but also in terms of providing, breeding grounds, offering shelter, nursery to the broodstock, not just of the finfish, but also of a diversity of shellfishes. Of course, when you have mangroves, you'd also have a lot of birds which come in, because there's a food chain in operation. There are certain trophic linkages which follow. And of course, we in Chicalim, we do also have major roosting site of bats, which is the flying fox, Pteropus giganteus. As somebody would ask, what exactly is a wetland? How does a bay qualify to be a wetland? So I was just reminded of something as simple as a definition of a wetland is there where the blue meets the green, a space where the blue, which is the water, meets the green. So it's got to do with inundation of soil, which keeps the soil hydric underwater for a sufficiently long period of time to promote anaerobic processes, make the soil very fertile, support a vegetation of flora and the whole thing, the gamete issues. So yes, in the mudflats of Chicalim and the intertidal patch of rocks that we have in Chicalim, we have amazing diversity of marine biota, include the clams, you've got Paphium malabarica, you've got, of course, the oysters, Chrysostria species, you've got a lot of these edible, though it's highly contentious. It is believed that sea slugs are kind of non-edible, but yes, there are a few which are eaten by the local community. We have the fiddler crab, which is a quintessential bioindicator species of mangrove swamps. You do also have mud crabs, Tyla serrata, which is commercially very important, and a host of other intertidal biota, which are not very charismatic, but they have a role to play in the critical energy budgets of the whole bay. I mean, I'm just trying to highlight the importance of the bay to the people here, of the village in particular, and of the state as a whole. I seek to draw everybody's attention to one particular species that we all are extremely proud of here in Chicalim, and that is the window pane oyster, of which we have brood stocks here, and not many places, I suppose, on the west coast of India, as also the east coast, the Malabar and the Coromandel coast of the Indian Peninsula, would have kind of a brood stock of this species, which is very popularly known as the window pane oyster. Technically, scientifically known as the Placuna placenta. And it for us in Chicalim and in Goa is a flagship species because it draws a lot of conservation attention to the bay. And the people in Chicalim have used this window pane oyster as a fulcrum of all the struggles. I would say for more than 30 years now, people have been very zealously protecting the bay against draconian, proposals of so-called development, not at all sustainable. Where if these proposals had to, see the light of the day, then we would have to pay a very heavy price, not just economic, but ecological price. And then people have stood their grounds, they have persevered, they have convinced the authorities, and so far so good. The bay is protected. Good news for us is a lot of statutory bodies in Goa, including the Goa State Biodiversity Board, has been reasonably convinced, and declaration of at least some stretch of the bay as biodiversity heritage sites under the Biological Diversity Rules 2004 and the National Biodiversity Act 2002 is in the offing. And I hope and pray, and we seek your blessings and prayers that the bay soon gets declared, at least if not in toto, at least a part of it, where you have the brood stock of the window pane oyster, as of course many other parameters which you need to fulfill to declare any given site as a heritage site. So that's the whole essence of this slide. So yes, the bay is teeming with marine biodiversity. It offers livelihood. It offers ecosystem services. It's aesthetically wonderful. It's got everything that qualifies to. I think I have somebody who's raising a hand. Of course, if that's by an error, I see. All right, thank you. I would request you to kindly hold on to your queries till the end of this session. I think that's fine, Dr. Goldin, or you want me to respond to
yes. I think it would be better if we have all the questions at the
together,
end.
yes.
So if you can,
a very polite
just
request
mark
to
your
everybody.
questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Kindly hold on to your queries and curiosity. Even if you disagree with me, it's perfectly fine. We would rather encourage any kind of dissent or disagreement so that we can have a little interaction, but at the end of the whole presentation. Thank you so much. So if I may just move on to the next slide. What is a bay? This is a little bit of technical information. In simple words, it's a part of the sea or a lake for us. Of course, it's an estuary which cuts into our shoreline. It's got a wide inlet. Usually it's something which is smaller than a gulf, so it doesn't really come anywhere close to a gulf. It's a body of water which is partially surrounded by land. There are multitudes of definitions, but I mean, you may choose anything that you find very comfortable and easy to understand. But what is very important is the genesis of the bay. How do you get a bay at all? So for a bay to be formed, there could be more than one reasons, an interplay of many things, from tectonics, which is movement of Earth's crustal plate over a long geological time scale. That's something that doesn't happen overnight. It's not instantaneous. Or maybe when the ocean overflows a certain coastline, and then, the coastline erodes into the ocean. So, there are a number of reasons how a bay is actually formed. It's a little bit of information in terms of genesis of the bay. What kind of environmental character does a bay have? I mean, the waters that the bay have, normally it's brackish as far as the Chicalim Bay is concerned. And obviously, since it's a zone of transition between the river and the fresh water here in Chicalim, we have these waters with a salinity character, which is very brackish, which means the salinity of the salt content is definitely more than what one would find upstream in the riverine zone, but definitely not as much as what you would find as you get closer to the Arabian Sea. So I believe that's enough to begin with in terms of understanding what a bay is. And as I said, and let me repeat, if somebody seeks to know whether a bay qualifies to be a wetland, I think the last statement that you see on your screen suffices, that a wetland is absolutely any place where the blue meets the green. I mean, just to keep it simple and short. Bay, by the very nature, in the kind of the geological setup, the hydrodynamics, the vegetation is normally calmer and is generally more protected than the open seas or the oceans. And therefore, generally what is seen is that they face, in event of some kind of extreme weathers, like let's say cyclonic precipitations, you have hurricanes, you got tsunamis, of course, not in this part of the world. But yes, in the recent past, whether you blame it on climate change or otherwise, we have been having a lot of erratic weather. And given this sort of unpredictable meteorological manifestations, bay is where you are relatively safe. So I think one reason, if at all, we seek to ask, why should I worry about my bay and protect it and make sure that it retains its pristine character, is because it keeps you safe. I mean, if that's more convincing at the end of the day, there's something very typical about our species, that you seek to reason out, and you need to know the justification for any kind of involvement that you want to give. So yes, maybe if you really want to know why should I protect my bay, it's because the bay protects, as simple as that. And for some of you who probably are from Maharashtra and Mumbai, I'm sure I've got some of my colleagues who are attending this webinar. There are, once again, number of theories as to why the place is called as Mumbai or Bombay. But among the many, one which is kind of little pertinent to today's discussion has got to do with the bay again. If you look at the word, I believe there's one argument that the Portuguese call this place Bombay. In many of us in Goa, we still say Bombay. There's a slight distorted version of Bombay, which is essentially means a good bay. I mean, so there's a bay in Bombay, there's a bay in Mumbai, and of course, people in Mumbai and Maharashtrians also believe this got to do with Mumbai Devi, and we don't seek to challenge that theory either. But there's some sort of a connect between a bay and the city of Mumbai. As you would agree with me, Mumbai, here in Goa again, bays make for excellent harbors. Major port cities are located very close to the bay, or maybe the bay itself serves as a natural harbor. Very importantly, bays are a sink of anthropogenic wastes, which means, I mean, we all need to accept, at least for once, that when we live, we ought to create wastes. Life is impossible without generating waste. That's a fallacy. If somebody thinks that you lead a clean life in the sense that you don't generate any kind of waste at all, that's not possible. And therefore, where you live, you ought to create waste. And disposal of the waste is not doing away with the waste. I mean, out of sight is not that the wastes have simply gone away or vanished from the face of the earth. They have to go somewhere. So bays are a sink of a lot of these anthropogenic wastes from human and the urban settlements, as also from the industrial zones. And I'm going to take you through this slide presentation a little later, and you'll get to see how the Chicalim Bay is impacted not only by the urban waste, but also by a lot of industrial influence. So yes, bays do a lot of good to you by, probably, if I may use the word, the extraordinary waste assimilation capacity. They have a capacity to assimilate waste without manifesting into any sort of untoward incidents. I mean, we'll talk about that a little later. So yes, the bays include the Chicalim Bay as well, are very important sink, the ultimate destination where your waste shall rest and sink into are the bays. And of course, notwithstanding all the positivities that I have spoken about thus far, it is a fact that pollution has certainly impacted and altered the ecosystem of the bay. And as we stand today, all across the world, wherever the bays and the wetlands exist, I'm talking about the bay, but you can extrapolate that for the entire range of wetlands that we have globally distributed, that a lot of novel, toxins have come in. A lot of new chemicals, which are extremely harmful, have come into the bays now, and eventually are sipping into our groundwater as also into the soil. So I think that's something which we need to be a little worried about. Yes, I mean, so do we bomb the bay? That's a question I seek to ask. And that's not meant to play with words, really speaking. I mean to say, do we continue with our assaults on the bay? And I would say the answer is a big no. And happily for all of us, again, at the SECON in Mumbai, there are a lot of wonderful groups who are working in Thane towards protecting wetlands. There are people who are working on protection of Powai Lake. And I'm sure there are many such wetland warriors who I'm not aware of, but I'm sure they're doing their little bit to contribute towards this global mandate of protecting our base. But I mean, I need to caution you, while people are trying to restore and protect base, we cannot deny that a bay is an important fulcrum of trade, commerce, transport, and industry. cumulatively, all these entities are inadvertently, I don't mean to say they do it on purpose. They could be doing that purposely as well. There could be a component, a deliberate action on part of these entities. But yes, the revolutionary war of wetland protection of the green warriors across the globe stands to be predated by all these entities. I mean, that's a very strong statement. I'm not trying to portray anybody as a villain, or I'm not trying to fix blames, but the fact remains today that our wetlands include the bay and absolutely everything, an all-encompassing term, the wetland, all kinds of ecosystems that get blanketed with the term wetland today are in a precarious state. And Chicalim Bay, of course, of my state, Goa, is no exception to the rule. I think that's a very, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be factual. I'm not trying to be emotional either. All that I say is based on hardcore scientific data. So taking this further. Right. Am I audible? I just need a confirmation. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, very much.
So we continue with our discussion, which is now going to be a little more specific to the Chicalim Bay. And before I take you to the precise location of the bay, I would just want you to get familiar with the biogeographic zones of my state. We are a small state with no comparison with big states like Maharashtra and the neighboring Karnataka, or maybe for that matter, any other state. That makes it more difficult for us to translate this mandate of conservation, because within 3,702 square kilometers of my small little state, which everybody wants to visit and probably buy a home, holiday home. I mean, the nearest that you can get to enjoying Goa is make frequent trips and come down as a visitor. And of course, you're most welcome. But you need to also be aware that any visitor to the state, anyone who intends to make a permanent abode in my state of Goa, should ensure that the person leaves as soft a footprint as is possible, because it's just within 3,000 and odd square kilometers of the state of Goa that we are seeking to balance our developmental aspirations with our forest conservation, with our tourism, with our industry, with our navigation, with our road transport, what have you. It's a big list. So that makes it, I mean, though we have advantages, and though we have some kind of positives in being a small state, small is beautiful, but small is also precarious. Small is also fragile. Small is also delicate. And all this very much applies to the state of Goa. So on your screen, if you see the classical division of my state into ecoregions or biogeographic zones, on the extreme right, you will see that contiguous with the Western Ghat, a stretch of the mountain ecosystem, the Western Ghats, then a large expanse of mid-highlands, which is what you see here. And this is where you have got those lateritic plateaus, which is now where you have a lot of anthropogenic stressors and pressures. And not to forget the coastline, which is where we have a lot of tourism happening, the land of the sun, sand, and sea, a state which is 365 days on holidays. I mean, that's how we have, I mean, I don't blame anybody, but that's exactly how we sought to project ourselves, not quite realizing the trap in mass tourism. And today we are paying a price for that, for over tourism, for mass tourism, which we could not, rationalize, we could not regulate. And now, happily for all of us, today the focus is gradually shifting to a more benign, a more eco-friendly, and a more, soft tourism option. This circle that I've put is where all my discussion pertains to. This is exactly where the bay is. If you see here, this is Tiswari, this is Marmugao. And I thought I'll just draw your attention. For those of you a little familiar with the geography of the state, this is basically where we're going to talk about this. This is the whole discussion. So just apologies. So a little bit on the geography of the Chicalim Bay. I have chosen a latest satellite image here of the US Navy. That makes, the whole spatial context a little more clear to the people who've logged in. This is a stretch which I'm going to talk about. This is the Arabian Sea. This is our Marmugao Port Authority's harbor. This one's a natural harbor, which is a point of import and export for a lot of trade and commerce. You can very clearly see here, this is the zona ingress of the saline waters, the Arabian Sea. This is how your estuaries, kind of eventually meet the sea. And this is where we have the serene village of Chicalim. And I've already spoken to you that we are a maritime state on the western coast of Indian Peninsula with the 3 classical regions. Most of these rivers that eventually drain and meet the Arabian Sea originate in the hilly terrains, passing through, if you just recall the previous slide, what originates and has its genesis in the hilly terrain will meander and stream through the coast, the lateritic plateaus and eventually drain the coast plains. A small request, I think somebody's got the mic on. Kindly switch off your mic, please. Apologies for that. Yes. So we have a total stretch of a linear distance about 105 to 107 kilometers of coastline, which of course is again kind of struggling between the tourism infrastructure. Some stretches of our seashore are critical habitats for species of high conservation value, including the olive ridley turtles and so on and so forth. And of course, in Chicalim Bay here, which is of course not along the shoreline per se, I've already spoken to you. It's a very fragile ecosystem for yet another scheduled species under Indian Wildlife Protection Act. It's a Schedule 4 species. Nonetheless, it's something very important for us. So we have a lot of backwaters in Goa, where, again, before these rivers join the sea, you have a kind of amazing network of these estuaries and backwaters. And I need to also tell you, since I've done a little work with that as well, as you move further up towards the Zuari from here, maybe you also have very interesting, this is one belt between the Mandovi, the Kumbarzo Canal, and the Zuari estuary. You have a very luxuriant patch of mangroves. I think probably the most luxuriant mangrove vegetation in the state of Goa is located in this particular areas, which is also where we have a population of Crocodilus palustris, the mugger, which is, as most of us would know, a Schedule 1 species. Goa has a very good river navigation system. Many of you who would have visited my state as tourists would have loved to cross the river by a ferry. And more importantly, I seek to draw your attention to this stretch, which has been a very convenient navigation portal, maybe until some 10, 15 years ago, for transport of mineral ore. May I just remind you, I had just mentioned that this is the Marmagaon Port Authority now, from where you have a lot of trade exchange in terms of import-export. So the mining leases of Goa, the iron ore, manganese, and what have you, as and when they were operational, they all existed in the closer to the Western Ghat fringe. So once you take the ore, you need to transport that, and in terms of cost effectiveness and the speed of transport, I think these very estuaries and the navigational portals served as the most convenient transport channel. Why am I saying that? Because navigation is again another potential threat to the fragile ecology of these stretches, where a lot of ore spillage movement, which causes a lot of turbulence in the water, sometimes even causing adverse hydrodynamic changes. You've got a lot of spillage, which I've just explained to you, and you've got a lot of movement, and that can certainly take a toll on, a lot of processes that go on critical to maintaining the ecological health of the space. So yes, a little before this, again, it probably starts from here. This is your highway. This is a road, of course. Somewhere here is the bridge. Some of you would know the Zuari Bridge. We have a new one now, which is again a major attraction. And all along here, from here again, this is Sankwal, and this is, of course, the Chicalim, and further you reach the Arabian Sea. So, all these stretch is teeming with shipyards. Construction and repairs is a major threat to the fragility of the bay, because this shipyard construction and repairs and dry docking and whatever kind of activity that goes on is definitely detrimental to the quality of water, A lot of these activities can add heavy metals to the water. And eventually, as I said, I'm going to talk to you about a few studies done by scientists of the NIO, which very categorically highlights how exactly are we predisposed to a threat on account of these activities, the profile of persistent, pollutants, organic pollutants, as also, of course, the industrial pollutants. And how does that raise a vulnerability to the people who reside along the bay? Because we are connected with the bay through food chain transfers. I mean, if you relish the fish, the shellfish, and whatever else that you take from the bay, then you cannot exempt yourself from the assault of these pollutants which have entered the bay. Again, thanks to your own industries and careless way of discharging the waste. So we're going to talk about that later. So yes, this is more or less, and this is the most important slide in my opinion. What I've done here is I've just slightly worked on this, and if you can see I am not sure, is my cursor visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Excellent. So if you look at this, I've just sought to draw your attention, and this is the San Jacinto Island, which is what you simply can't miss if you're driving from the airport via Cortali to Panjim or any other place. There's a very scenic green, an island kind of settlement on the left, which is connected now with a bridge. Good old days, there wasn't a bridge per se. And may I draw your attention to the kind of intensive coastal installation of engineered artifacts all along. Kind of have a look. You see, this is the plateau. It's slightly on an elevation, a significant elevation. This is a slope. Kindly have a look. Critical installations. This is where you land in Goa, the Daboli airport. This is your port. And these are some of the educational, it's an educational hub. You have the BITS Pilani Goa campus here. Look, that's all fine, but look at the density of residential settlement all along the bay. That's something very interesting. And as I don't need to, put forth any documentary evidence to emphasize the threat perception from the wastes that emerge from these settlements. And all along this bay, right from Kotali, Sankwal, all along here, I wish I could, take you further and magnify this. You very categorically see these structures, which are shipyards. You have dry docking facilities, you have construction facilities, especially during the monsoon, when the hull of these vessels get encrusted with a lot of these barnacles and the epizootic forms. They want to clear that up, because if the hull is encrusted, then the fuel consumption is higher because it offers a greater resistance to the movement of the vessel, right? So what I'm trying to explain to you is this area is something very important for us as a wetland. This is the way that I'm talking about here. Basically, it's kind of here. Yeah, this, and this region here, this is the Vareg Island, as far as I understand. This is the serene village of Chicalim down slope here. This is how you go up and whatever. This, happily for us now, the Goa State Biodiversity Board has in principle agreed, and I think the process is on to get this part declared in the whole bay, at least as a biodiversity heritage site, because it fulfills all the criteria as laid down under the NBA 2002 and Biological Diversity Rules 2004. All that, I don't seek to bog you down with too much information, but what is very important for everybody is two things. Please understand how we have altered the bay with engineered assets. I love to normally talk about earth capital and engineered capital, right? You look at this and you'll agree with me. You will have no hesitation to accept what I say. And what I say is this, that we have steadily displaced the earth capital and replaced it by manufactured capital or engineered capital. I think that it's there for everybody to see. And that's a major threat, that when you seek to replace the earth capital or nature with your engineering assets or engineered assets, your construction, your industries, what have you. And this area has been I would say in the how would I put, an eye of a storm, or people have been eyeing this for ages now. We've had a lot of project proponents who've been seeking to come up with shipyards. They've been coming up with ideas of establishing a marina. And thanks, of course, to the eco-sensitive and eco-conscious villagers of Sankwal, Chicalim. I mean, I would say, I would have no hesitation in saying, since I've been very closely associated with particularly one group in Chicalim village, which is the Chicalim Villagers Action Committee, a group that has probably shown the direction to many similar kind of village action groups all across the state, and sends any kind of political agenda that the only purpose is to save our soil and save our land. You know, that's how it goes. And you don't fight your battles just with emotions and sentiments, but you come up with a body of evidence, irrefutable scientific evidence that will stand the test of scrutiny, judicial and otherwise. And that's how they've won thus far. They've been able to resist all kinds of temptations, all kinds of pressure tactics, all kinds of intimidation, and still protect the bay. And that's something amazing. And I hope and pray that spirit continues. So this is something very important. Let me move further. I have to acknowledge a lot of images that I'm using here is thanks to the Chicalim Villagers Action Committee in particular. I suppose we have the gentleman here, somebody who's spearheaded this movement for a long time, Mr. Rui Araujo, who's also incidentally the chairman of Chicalim Biodiversity Management Committee, who's offering his leadership and committed support to this struggle for quite some time now. And this is what you see on your screen is exactly the wealth of biodiversity and heritage that we have in the village of Chicalim. You've got some of the oldest megalithic pit burials. You've got some of the oldest man-made structures or caves. Recently, I suppose one of these was vandalized, and the CVAC and some other groups have also sought to file an appeal and an FIR seeking to invite some kind of punitive action against the act of vandalism. We have the 16th century ruins of St. Bartholomew Church. Ladies and gentlemen, in the beginning, I did tell you that Chicalim is an agrarian village. The mainstay of people's livelihood in good old days used to be agriculture. A lot of horticultural crops, a lot of agriculture. And for the information of many here who may not have been aware that in Christianity, we have patron saints. So interestingly, St. Bartholomew is a patron saint of paddy growers, of farmers. And that's an amazing archaeological, artifact here. Then, of course, we have the 16th century St. Francis Xavier Church. We have the Satiri Temple. I'm sorry, I've just missed out on an image here. That's about the heritage. We've got some homes which are living monuments of glorious history. We've got homes which are as many as 300 years old here. And of course, to speak about the amazing diversity of life forms that not just the bay holds, but also the village holds within its precincts. You've got amazing diversity of birds, which a lot of the youngsters in the village have been documenting. You've got something as important as what we call in Konkani and I suppose in Marathi as well, tisryo or clams, of which we've got clam beds that get regularly replenished, supporting livelihoods to a number of families in the village. I mean, I've known people who've done very well with a single source of income by selling these clams. So it's not just an emotional connect, but it's much more than that. This is a sustainable livelihood option that the bay offers to the people here. We have something as a lot of work on the bay has gone in from the NIO scientists, including Dr. Baban Ingole, who's a reputed benthos biologist from NIO. Clement and Ingole have come up with a lot of publications, and this is a representative image. But one interesting benthic crustacean that you find here is something called as the snapping shrimp. You hear a sound like this. If you choose to keep quiet and just walk the bay, sometimes in the sediments or from the sediments, you hear this kind of click sounds. I've also done a little bit of work with my students years ago, and we found the presence of Alpheus crasimanus, which is a snapping shrimp, which is again a very interesting species. You do find sea slugs. You have a great diversity of birds, including the not so common Egyptian vultures. You've got Scylla the mud crab, Kodpe kullu as you call it in Konkani. So yes, the bay is teeming with life. It's not just about the fish in the waters, but also multitudes of services that the bay is relentlessly and selflessly offering to the people here in the village. And I think that's one reason, at least, that we need to reciprocate the favor granted by the bay and take upon our shoulders the role of custodian to protect these bay. If our forefathers have protected the bay for us today, and we talk so much about the bay, we get emotional about the bay, then it is our responsibility as well to protect it for the future generation and for posterity. And that's not going to be easy given the kind of pressures that operate today in new matrices of very aggressive developmental blueprints. It's going to be very difficult. I've already spoken about these agro-PC silvicultural complexes. That means in the bay, not only do we have agriculture, we do also have a lot of mangroves. We've got horticulture, we've got fishing activities. An image here is the traditional ethnotechnology of our tribes, the sluice gates. I mean, that's a brilliant technology. My learned friend, Dr. Nandakumar Kamath, has written volumes about this. Another classmate who I always am very proud about, Dr. Sangeeta Sonak, who was formerly the fellow Terry. She's also done a lot of work with Kazan lens. These are some of the, evidences of species that you find here. This is the window pane oyster. I'm going to talk about it a little later. These are a small bit of kind of oyster reef, which gets formed here, something like that. These are barnacles. So, as I said before, sometimes if you allow these communities to establish, that in itself is going to promote a lot of fish breeding. Naturally, you don't need to really do anything, but the nature is extremely resilient. It can probably recuperate and reinstate all its past glory, provided you choose to stay away and stay apart and let nature kind of, take on the reins of whatever needs to be put in place. I think that's something very important. Well, now this is very important. Now, what you see here is an amazing image of, which again, I borrowed from the Chicalim Villagers Action Committee. This is what we probably had 25, 30 years ago, the villagers coming together to protest any kind of unwanted development in the bay. It's not really, I mean, the word development is misplaced here. Some sort of proposals which would take a toll on the fragile bay. Then you've got in the recent past, the coming together of like-minded people from the village, a lot of of course, wherever you have an opportunity to use a stage to catapult yourself into prominence, you have politicians coming there, right? So yes, a lot of politicians have also used this forum as a launchpad to come into prominence and then eventually dissociate it. So, but kudos to the simple villagers of Chicalim who have stood their grounds and have, continued to practice the fidelity with the village. I think that's something amazing. And then the bay reciprocates in a big way, and the bay reciprocates this way. As you can see, you've got people who just descend down into the bay, and you've got a lot of people. You can see some of them carrying the buckets full of clams. This is one of the richest clam bed in the state of Goa for Paphia malabarica. I think at some point of time we would also get something called, Valorita. Some of us who've has a little understanding of marine zoology, or in Konkani we call them kare kube. I think at some point of time the bay used to have a diversity of the bivalves of clams, but even today, and I want to say this very clear to you, that remember that like most of the maritime states in the country, Goa also enforces a ban on inshore fishing during the rainy season, and that's done very strictly without any compromise, and we all know the reasons. And that's when you have the gravid fish that comes into the the Neratic waters or the inshore province for the purpose of egg laying or breeding. And that if you take those gravid fish in your net just to satiate your taste buds, you're going to interfere with the recruitment of stock, because in the next season, you're not going to get any fish because you've overexploited. And at that point of time, I think the shellfish of Chicalim or the Tisrios are a wonderful substitute for what we do not regularly get, and that's the finfish. So you ask any Goan, it's quite an ordeal to have your lunch and dinner without fish. So when you do not have enough of finfish, your attention gets the focus shifts to the shellfish, and the shellfish of Chicalim has been a source of protein security to the people here at an affordable price, particularly during the rainy season. So yes, the villagers have been utilizing this resource thus far very amicably, but in the recent past there have been very clear indications of greed, and people have been selfish about the shellfish. I'm just choosing to play with words. People have been selfish about the shellfish, and that's not really going to work. So, and of course, the custodians of this natural wealth in Chicalim are not going to let that happen. And I'm going to show you why and how a little later as we skip the slides. But this is a slide to tell you how rich the bay is in terms of livelihood options. I mean, just imagine, and especially in terms of women empowerment, and this government has been talking a lot about empowering women and giving them a space in the financial, canvas. So I have to be saying this, that most of these people who descend down in the bay, if you look at this image itself, you would realize they're predominantly women who have a sense of self-sufficiency and financial independence by selling whatever little clams they get. I think they get that sense of being self-reliant, and I think that's something very important. So this is again something I thought I would share with you, and to quickly take you to something more serious, I just mentioned to you how this bay is getting increasingly impacted by a lot of industrial activity, and that's for you to have a look. Down here on the slide, you see this, the barges, which were used. Of course, now there's very little movement of barge because there's practically no mining happening. The mining and imbroglio, the stalemate continues. We are not really having much mining happening, and therefore most of these barges have been now, kind of scrapped, or they are kind of docked, and they leach out a lot of these toxic paints, and a lot of these barge repairs and barge construction activities, I've said before, is a matter of concern for us. So, and remember, I've said something, I've taken liberty to sensationalize by saying that if the pollution from the urban and industrial sectors in the vicinity of this bay do not get regulated and they continue their assault incessantly, then it's going to be very soon that the Chicalim Bay will soon be the Minamata and Niigata of Goa. I know it's a very radical statement, and by this I'm only trying to tell you that just as it happened some years ago in Japan, in Niigata and Minamata, where the industry started releasing effluents, which were pretty, kind of benign, because I think what they released was inorganic mercury. But in the sediments of the Niigata and Minamata Bay, the microbial communities transmutated the inorganic and relatively harmless mercury into a potently toxic organic fraction of ethyl and methyl mercury that got bioaccumulated in the fish, biomagnified in the fish. And the Japanese are very fond of fish. I'm not very sure if you know that the highest per capita consumption of fish anywhere in the world is in Japan. It's not Goa, by the way. And of course, our penchant for, the kind of craze we have for fish as Goans is also well known. So yes, we do also eat a lot of fish, but what kind of fish are we eating? Just now I celebrated the bay for the kind of fish that it offers to us. But now I need to caution you, is the fish that we take from the bay the right kind? And if not, what is the issue? As I've said, you have this paper, which I have chosen to highlight here by Thirodkar, Gauns and Ansari. I think the paper came up very recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, 2016 to be precise, where they tried to evaluate the water and the sediment quality in some 3-4 places where from we get our fish, particularly the oysters and the clams and the shellfish. And it's scary. The outcome of the finding is something which is, it's worrisome. What did that show? It clearly indicated that there is a dominance on nutrients, which is not good. I mean, these nutrients is not something which will nourish your body. That's causing eutrophication, which means undesirable blooming of algae, which can release some toxins in the water. You've got pheopigments, which is a decomposition intermediary of chlorophyll, which is again not good. You've got a lot of this particulate organic carbon, POC is how you put it in short. You've got total suspended solids in the bay is very high. And all in all, the picture is not good, which means the productivity of the bay is now at stake. All the while the bay offered you so much, and now with your continuous assaults, you have changed that, the entire equation, and the bay may not be productive for the kind of commercially important fish and shellfish and finfish that you depend on the bay for all this while. And where are these coming, of course? I don't think this is de novo. Nothing is de novo. It has to have a source. And the source is very obviously attributable to the anthropogenic activities, to you and I and all of us together who've been a little reckless and careless and in defiance of our reasoning and rationale. We've continued to assault this bay with, for reasons, I mean, this is the short-term myopia, as you call it. For short-term gains, you turn a Nelson's eye, or you turn a blind eye to the long-term effects, and that's what is happening. And the scientists have categorically recommended that we now need to monitor the water quality of the bay as also that of the sediments on a regular basis. It's very important to have a comprehensive pollution database. And I think this is a takeaway from the slide, that if we do not desist and stop our assault on the bay in whatever way you may visualize that, then the situation is already grim, and it's going to be terrible in days to come. That probably the fish and the shellfish and all kinds of edible resources that we take from the bay may not be appropriate in terms of the quality for the kind of toxins that they've accumulated. And it's not very unreasonable to understand this, because your shellfish, your oysters, your mendios, as you call them in Konkani, the window pane oysters, are all filter feeders, which means they filter the water. And when you filter the water, you tend to concentrate what there is in the water. And what is in the water, obviously, is what you see on your screen. You've got nutrients, you've got pheopigments, you've got particulate, you've got a lot of heavy metals as well. And these heavy metals eventually sink into your body. Your body is going to be the sink for all these deleterious and detrimental heavy metals, and they're going to manifest into a lot of pathology, including malignancy. So we need to be extremely careful. Again, let me highlight, anyone asking why should we worry about the bay getting polluted? That's because you love to eat the fish from there. Please be aware. Next slide. As I said, the bay is one of the finest examples as a wetland that upholds not only the ethos of wetland protection and conservation, but also it fulfills probably all the 3 or 4 pillars of what is recommended by National Biodiversity Act 2002 and Biological Diversity Rules. What does it say? It says you need to protect and conserve. You need to sustainably utilize. A lot of us have this impression that when we speak about conserving something, that you just stop looking at that, no touch. It's not touch me not. It's only touch me carefully, touch me gently, and don't keep on touching me. That's basically what is sustainable utilization. Allow me a breathing space. Allow me to recuperate. Allow me to replenish my stocks. And then you come again. You don't go on, looting and plundering my wealth. So I believe that's what is sustainable utilization. Access and benefit sharing, you can't hoard. It can't be one person's property or proprietorship. It's a collective good of the whole community. And when I say it's a collective good of the whole community, everybody need to have an access. You need to evolve some kind of benefit sharing mechanisms in a just manner. And that is the task of biodiversity management committees, thankfully constituted by most of the panchayats in Goa, thanks to the Goa State Biodiversity Board. They've been doing amazing work in terms of constituting the BMCs, empowering them despite all kinds of political hurdles. and giving them that free space to work, not for people, not for politicians, but for the biodiversity and people. That's very important. That is the spirit of BMC and the Biodiversity Act. And I think that's what I've said. The Chicalim Bay has paved the way for Goa's, as I call it, the first statutory notified, these are gazette notified. I'm very proud to say this, because not just because I've been a party to drafting these rules, but also because the authorities, particularly the State Biodiversity Board, despite all kinds of pressures and hurdles from the line governments and what have you, they came up on 22nd of September 2022, the first ever for the state and probably for the country, I'm not really sure, guidelines and recommendations for sustainable utilization, conservation and management of bioresources with special emphasis on controlled harvesting, mind you, these are very important words, and conservation of edible clams, other shellfish, and critical bioresources. This is amazing, absolutely unheard of. I mean, on paper, I have this lament that unfortunately we do a lot of conservation on papers and in files. That's not going to help. As I always say, and let me reiterate, you need to conserve the biodiversity and wildlife where it exists. And your biodiversity doesn't exist in your brochures and in your pamphlets and in your files and in your PowerPoint presentation. It's there out in the field. You need to have people out in the field. So, all talk and no action is not going to really solve. So this is something interesting, that this is in the scope of Biodiversity Management Committee to enforce it. Now, it's not enough that you just come up with a legislation, say you need to harvest these stocks very sustainably, guaranteeing access and benefit sharing. Everybody gets a share in the profits that you make by taking these bioresources. How do you do that? I mean, you have been mandated as a Biodiversity Management Committee, which is a statutory committee, mind you, you've got powers. All across the country, you've been endowed, you've been mandated with this authority to protect your biodiversity, and you have to do that. So this is something interesting. I mean, these are women who sell the clam resources from the bay and this wetland on in our markets. Have a look, window pane oyster. This is what it is. It's popularly called as cappies.
Dr. Sorry to disturb, but we have overshot the time, so
yes,
we'll have
I'm just going to quickly finish it off in next 5 minutes.
Fine. Yeah.
If you just give me 5 minutes, I'm just going to finish this fast.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. I just want you to have a look at this. This is how we used to get a lot of shells in our bay. Today, the population renewal dynamics is kind of slightly shaky because of reasons I've already explained to you. As and when you get a bumper crop, this is how that would be sold. People would kind of sustainably exploit it. Natural stocks of window pane oyster may be found in a number of places, including Kakinada and some other places, but the brood stock habitats are very few in the country, and that is what makes the Chicalim Bay a very ideal place for protection. And that's basically what I want to say. A few studies that I have been a party to long back in 2009, I had gone with Mr. Rui Araujo to the bay with the locals, and I remember that was the time we needed to put a dossier before the Coastal Zone Management Authority, so we picked up this. I also remember presenting some of these shells to the then Minister for Environment, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, when they came down for public consultations. So yes, that's what it is. Wonderful studies by the NIO in terms of size frequency and population dynamics. These are some of the places in the world. Of course, the most celebrated place for window pane oyster is in Philippines. In fact, it's a place called Capiz. Capiz is a small town in Philippines, which is why these are also called as Capiz shells. You also get them in small isolated patches in Gujarat, Andhra, and in Goa, of course, in Naushi and Chicalim. These are, why do you call them window pane oysters? Because the shells are such that they are just perfect. They are thin, but translucent enough to grant you privacy, at the same time allow enough light in your interiors. These are some of the guidelines. I'm not going to really go into these guidelines, but this you can just have a look. What we have basically done is we want to prioritize the locals to access these resources. We are strictly banning any kind of implements and mechanized tools for exploitation. We are talking about the limit of size for harvesting should not be less than 3 centimeters. So these are some safeguards. I don't want to really go into the details for want of time. But this is basically what this gentleman here is the one who's done Herculean, amazing work with the Chicalim Bay, not just about the window pane oyster, but also about the bay in general. Ms. Ruyaraj. These are our local fisherwomen who've been selling a lot of this, and such. We have also recommended in these regulations a no-take zone, which is to be serving as some kind of a seed bank. And we've also decided a quota system and the carrying capacity of the fisher folks for the bay. But I'm coming to the last part now. I've already told you this is ecologically fragile designated site. It's soon going to be hopefully a biodiversity heritage site. But in the recent past, especially after COVID, that there wasn't much happening in the bay, and the bay was left all to itself. There is now a steady recovery of the window pane oyster, and the minute you have them coming up, then you have temptations going galore. You've got a lot of people coming from all over the state to plunder and loot this natural wealth gratis. So sometimes the Biodiversity Management Committee, as also the CVAs in Chicalim, also need to take intervention of the police. This is something unheard of probably again, that to monitor the fishing activity per se, in the sense sustainability and access and benefit sharing mechanisms. Sometimes the state police also, these are police from Vasco who've been trying to regulate the number of visitors to the bay. Window pane oyster shell, here you can see most of the homes in Goa, especially if they're dating back to the Portuguese time, would not have glass panes. Instead, they would have the shell of cappies. This is one dinner set. I was just checking some websites which is now being offered. I just checked it yesterday for a whopping price of 11,000 rupees. It's a dinner set made exclusively of the window pane oyster shells. These are some lampshades, and there's a lot of activities happening in collaboration with the ICR in Goa, Rapid Fish Count. Constant effort at involving the community. Very happily, the religious leaders as well have taken a lot of interest in Chicalim village, and they're playing their role in sensitizing the people towards protection of the bay. Recently, the villagers also tried to, put back the shells to offer a substratum for settlement aspect, an experiment which we are not very sure of. But yes, I think there's a lot of thinking out of box. Some scientists have also proposed some kind of ranching techniques, which are very economically feasible, but everything still on pilot scale. And I just want to end this by telling very happily that in 2019, I am a teacher. I teach at Goa's only women's college, which is Carmel College of Arts, Science and Commerce, in a small tribal hamlet of Nuve. And in 2019, along with 4 of my students then, who were just first or second semester students, we were invited to represent India at National University of Singapore, competing with 13 countries of South Asia, and we won the 2nd place in presenting research on the Chicalim Bay. This is something which came as a small, incentive for us towards our, interest and contribution towards saving the bay. That's a small collage. That's, I believe, the last slide. This is just about 3 or 4 days ago. The shellfish gains, play with words, over exploitation of window pane oyster at the bay, leaves green worried. That's contemporary scenario. Thank you. I think I kind of put it on a fast track, Dr. Golden. Apologies. But
sorry,
yes.
no,
It's fine.
It was going really good. I had to break your momentum, but it was interesting. I wish I could have kept it for a longer time and not troubled you this way.
No,
but it was good learning.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, so
please.
if people could please raise your hand.
I have a disclaimer before I start taking your questions. I have a disclaimer. I am a learner myself, so I'm not too sure if I would have answers to all your questions, but that needn't stop you from asking questions, please.
Yes, sure. We are learners all alike.
I would like to share my observations. I am Ravi Shankar.
Very good afternoon, sir. Pleasure to have you.
Afternoon, Borkar. Can somebody, give me that video? It is blocked, so people can see me, who I am.
Dr. Ravi Shankar Tupali is a very learned gentleman. He's an FAO consultant, and I'm really thrilled to have him here attending this. Dr. Golden, could you just give? Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon, everyone, and my senior, Dr.
I'm seeing Dr. Venkatesh also.
Yeah, from
yeah, that reminds. So, Dr. Ravi Shankar, just a second. Before we just forget about this, can we all put on the video so that we have a group photo and then continue with the question answer? Otherwise, we will miss out. Taking the group photo.
Meeting
yeah. Can I request everyone to please put on their videos, and I request my colleague Ms. Zulfia to please take the group photo accordingly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Golden. I'm seeing a lot of faces after so long. Many of my students, colleagues, seniors, people who inspire me. Wonderful.
You are a popular person.
Wonderful talk, Manoj. As usual, it is, of course. And
please, can I?
As pointed out by Borkar, this is a very fragile and important ecosystem which gets affected because of the interventions on the land. That is also one of the critical things. Runoffs by agricultural things or industrial effluents or whatever it is. In that sense, I would like to say that there is a need for better coordination among different departments connected with this. For example, NIO has been doing a lot of work. CMFRA has been doing a lot of work. Fisheries departments, state fisheries research institutes, they all have been doing a lot of work, and data is scattered. So there is a need for compilation of data, which will help in kind of enlightening the policymakers. After all, the policymakers and decision takers influence our conservation or sustainable management of bioresources. And they need only one A4 size paper. More than that, they can't read, and they don't have time or patience also. So in that sense, there is a need for better coordination. And also, as these are interrelated to mangroves also. Forest department and fisheries department also should join together to take these efforts further. And more academia should be involved. Whatever research that is taking place, like many MPhil theses and PhD theses, should be in thousands, should be available all over India, along the maritime states, in the maritime states. It also needs compilation, and so that will help in taking better decisions. That is what is needed. And another important thing our Borkar made is the PBR. PBR is a very good document, but so far we are only working on qualitative data, not quantitative data. Quantitative data is required in order to kind of make use of the provisions of the access and benefit sharing mechanism or realizing the provisions of Nagoya Protocol. If you say that this panchayat has this much of this many species, this many plants, this many birds, something like that, is not going to be useful unless you say that this is the quantity we have. Then only we can negotiate that. I have already advised many times to the NBA and also to many state biodiversity boards to kind of use this one. Like quantification of data is required on the bioresources. And also the technical support groups that kind of support in bringing out the PBR should be strengthened with stakeholders like who are at research level, so that the PBRs will be a valuable and useful document. PBR should not end up as paper tiger. Unfortunately or fortunately, nowadays SBBs are kind of cut and paste mode. They are making the PBR because of the NGT direction, National Green Tribunal. Somebody should have also take this cost with the NGT saying that PBRs cannot be minted. So these kind of some amicus curiae experts should talk about this. then only we will have valuable PBR, which will help in realizing the ABS provision. And another important point is the rural development department should be roped in, because all these fishermen communities and fishermen villages, they don't have decent jetties at all to kind of park their boats or, use their, kind of mending their nets or something like that. And final point, which it is, out of the subject, but Borkar made one point like 365 days holidays in Goa. That means I take that point in a positive way. There are people who are enjoying 365 days. So we should target them only after retirement, because many scientists do good work because they have some hobbies. Hobbies and habits only can help in conservation and sustainable management. If you are given a mandate, you become tense. That is what, like we can see in our own country, this, union territories like Goa and Pondicherry, more relaxed than British ruled states.
Right.
They are always bureaucratic and all that. So I just wanted to make this point so that, it will help our younger generation who are listening to this. And I also, once again, appreciate taking this forum, our Borkar, for his beautiful articles every 15 days. So if I don't receive those articles, I become tense and why he has not published. Please
Thank
keep
you.
doing that,
Thank
Borkar. All the best
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you. Very grateful.
Thank you. Yes, sir. That point is well taken. Yeah. Does anyone else also, please, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
I think Professor Satyanarayana.
Yes, Dr. Satyanarayana.
Excellent presentation. And also thank you for having updated my knowledge with regard to the coastal zones. And actually today, one thing that we have good resources to keep it safely in the safe wallet, which we are not able to use it for the practical purposes. And today, excellent message. And one thing, the Goa area, whether it's a strictly followed or thing is stable use of this node of the I am a retired professor from biology and do like the Borkar. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Golden, I think Professor Satyanarayana is done with his submission. Any other questions, please? Hello?
I think even Mr. Golden has
Lost his
muted
link.
himself. Muted himself.
Oh,
Anybody
sorry.
from-
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying that, in the chat box also people have appreciated your
Yes,
talk.
please.
So that is a good thing.
Thank
Dr. Utkarsh, if you had any question, you could please ask
No,
it. Yeah.
I really don't have any question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there are many questions or so, because it was a very self-explanatory one, and I think you did very good justice, Dr. Borkar. So
Thank
it
you.
was nice listening to you as usual, and so we'll proceed ahead, and we will surely share the PPT if anybody would like to have it, the recording on the YouTube, and we will also forward this to the MOEFCC, since we are supposed to document all this up and keep it in the records. So this will go to the ministry's wetland division website also. Yeah. I would now request my colleague Ms. Zulfia to carry the proceedings ahead and propose
Dr.
the vote of
Golden,
thanks.
I have, if I may just say one thing.
Please.
It's so encouraging to see people from as far as Germany who have joined in. We have Professor Venkateshwara, from the former director of the CFTRI Mysuru, who just opened up his video. So it's so happy to see him. We have Mr. Rui Arauj, who I can see his video on.
Yeah, he
the
was just
man
two
who's
hours.
in a big way, responsible for keeping the bay as it is. So thank you, Rui. My
Thank you, Dr.
colleagues and
Manoj.
my
It was
students,
a very informative
thank you.
session that I
I,
had
I
enjoyed
have
each and every.
one of my former students who assisted me very well in my formative days of research, Dr. Neelam Kumarpant, and my present colleague, Dr. Utkarsha, with whom I've been doing a lot of work on mothers. So, and of course, not to miss out, there's 4 girls, my ex-students, Karina, Sakshi, Riddhi, I don't see the other girl. All right, thank you so much again for being there. Wonderful to see you all again. And I have my colleagues, Ms. Vinita, Teja, Pratiksha. Thank you so much again for making that. Yes, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Golden, back to you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I
sir.
request. Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you, sir.
Zulfiya.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Wonderful
Today we
presentation,
got to
really.
know the significance of Chicalim Bay and your inspiring words towards conserving it. And thank you once again, sir. We SACON EACP team is looking forward to associate with you in future. Now I request Mr. Mohammed Ibrahim, Information Officer SACON EACP, to propose the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manoj Borkar, sir, for accepting our invitation and agreeing for the webinar within a short duration. And it was a wonderful presentation, sir. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experiences with all of us on today's topic, Chicalim Bay of Goa and Eco-Fragile Estuarine Wetland. Indeed, it was a great pleasure for us SACON EACP to host this webinar on one of the important topic. We are also thankful to our audience, whoever are with us patiently till the end of this session. The interaction part was indeed very informative. I would like to thank Wetland Division, MOFCC for initiating this Save Wetland campaign. I also like to thank our Honorable Director, Sri Virendra R. Tiwari, Wildlife Institute of India, and Dr. Golden Quarters, SACON EACP Coordinator, for their support and guidance. Also, I thank our IT cell for their technical assistance. Especially thank EACP.
I think his connection has lost.
No, as Dr. Golden said, they have an issue with the internet connectivity.
I'm really sorry, yeah, but
No,
I
that's
would like
fine,
to
that's
thank you all for being
Yeah.
present over here, taking your time off and
Sorry,
attending this very important lecture. Yeah. Yes, Mohammed, continue.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our Honorable Director, Sri Virendra R. Tiwari, Wildlife Institute of India, and Dr. Golden Quarters, SACON EACP for their entire support and guidance. Also thank our IT cell for their technical assistance. Thank you, especially our EACP team. They made this event today successful. And thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Hello?
thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you all. Yeah, we can
Bye. Have a
now.
pleasant afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.